This podcast is sponsored by Tieleman Pool Technology. Experts have predicted that Tieleman movable floors are going to take the pool industry by storm. So are you a high-end pool builder who wants to expand their business and increase sales with this luxurious pool solution? Then don't miss this opportunity, as Tieleman Pool Technology is looking for dealers in the United States. Learn more about us by visiting our website at tieleman.eu.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Pool Magazine Podcast. Today I'm chatting with Stan Resnick, Chief Technology Officer for Poolside Tech, manufacturers of the hit new product, the Attendant. It's a pleasure to have you with us today on the show.
So, I've seen your product at a ton of trade shows, and I wanted to get you on a call today to take a deeper dive into the Attendant and talk a little bit about the capabilities, what the product does, the value that it has for homeowners and technicians, and just get you to explain your product a little bit better to our audience of pool contractors and pool builders that may be thinking about adding the Attendant to their service pad.
Sure. Well, so there are many things that we do to improve energy efficiency. I would say the core has to obviously do the bulk of the energy in a typical pool is spent heating or chilling whatever bodies of water you have, right? It could be pool, spa. And so one of the things that we do, which is pretty unique, is that we basically learn the capabilities of your equipment on your pool pad over time. And we take a pretty different approach to what our competitors do in terms of scheduling. So with what our competitors do, scheduling is as basic as you tell some piece of equipment to turn on at a particular point in time, right? So if you take a very simple example, let's say you want to go into your hot tub, right? Typically what you have in mind is when you want to go swimming, right? And with all of the existing automation products in the market today, you're going to have to essentially guess how far in advance you're going to be needing to heat that pool, spa, whatever you're swimming in order to have it be at the temperature you want, right? So if you take a super simple example, right? Let's say you want to go swimming in your hot tub and it's 6 p.m. You're going to guess that maybe it takes 2 hours to get that hot tub up to temperature, right? Of course, unless you're sitting there with the weather forecast in the spreadsheet, chances are you're not going to be incredibly precise with knowing exactly when to kick the heater on, for instance.
Right.
And that is something that we see time and time again. Obviously, ton of factors actually affect how long it's going to take to get you to a particular temperature. And so this is where we really try to set ourselves apart, because we know what the capabilities of your equipment are, right? We know what the weather is going to be like over the next several hours to several days. We're able to formulate a way to get you to go and get into your hot tub at the right temperature at the time you asked for. So kind of think of it in a Google Maps type analogy, where you don't usually tell Google Maps many things except where you want to get to and when, right? I mean, it's the job of the computer to then figure out how to make that happen. And that's kind of what we do, right? So with us, you're simply going to say, hey, I want to go swimming and I want my hot tub at 1:02, let's say at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. And that's what the system will do. It will wake up some amount of hours before you scheduled it. It will look at the weather forecast, and it will basically make an intelligent determination of how do we get you from where you are now to where you want to go, spending the least amount of money. It could be as simple as, hey, we're just going to turn on your gas heater at the right time, right? It could be, hey, we know that the weather forecast is such that your natural heat rise of your pool or spa doesn't require us to do anything, right? Maybe you save all the energy being wasted by not preheating it, for instance, if we know that you will naturally get to where you're trying to get to. And if you have multiple heat sources, we're able to maximize the cost or the efficiency based on what you have at the pad, and really make sure that if you have, let's say, a solar loop and a gas heater, right, that we maximize how much heat we get out of your solar loop, and then for the last hour or however much we need to catch up, we minimize the burning of your fossil fuels or the operation of your electric heat pump. So all of that is essentially just something that happens in the background, right? The computer can do all these calculations. It can constantly be aware of the changing weather forecast, and with us, you're telling the system what you want to have happen, right? Similarly, if you look at something different like filtering, we're able to track essentially every time the water is running through the filter. So the way that most folks, and I'm sure if you've done this yourself, you've probably seen how most folks configure their filtering schedules. There's some number of hours that the system will just be set to run every day. If you have, let's say, water features, like perhaps you like to look at fountains, right? And or maybe you have something else that you're doing that causes the water to run through the filter. In our world, we actually keep track of not just how many hours you scheduled a particular event to happen, like filter my pool, right? But we actually track essentially all the water that went through a filter in a given period in time. And so now we're able to do interesting things like subtract the amount of time we're filtering the water because you were running your fountains, right? And so we can actually be smart about scheduling your filtration to be aware of, so not just some fixed schedule, but actually be aware of what all happened on the pad, right? Whether you were running fountains or doing something else that further caused your water to run through filters.
So explain that a little bit more, because one of the questions that we had was, how does the Attendant plus chemistry automate pool filtration and chemical balancing?
Well, so two separate ideas to unpack here, right? Let's talk about the filtering. So the plus chemistry is something that we've actually recently spent a lot of time working on. We just a few weeks back we got our NSF 50 listing for the Attendant product. So
terrific.
Yeah, we've been quite focused on chemistry and making sure that we deliver a nice, most importantly, safe ability to manage your chemicals. So when you're talking about chemistry management, unfortunately, this industry has been kind of about selling more boxes to the end user, right? So typically, what you will see is that there's a separate automation system, and then aside from the automation system, there is, let's call it, a chemical controller, right? And they tend to be relatively simple devices that take sensor inputs like pH and ORP, right, in an attempt to control pumps if you're dosing some chemical to address whatever pH or ORP changes that you need to address. So with us, we kind of took a holistic approach. So first of all, the Attendant is really one unit. It's the brain of the pad, and it's completely aware of every single thing that's going on with the pad at the same time. I'll get back to why that's important in a second. But what we wanted to do is obviously to be able to monitor what's going on with your water, right? And we do that through our chemistry module. So you're essentially able to then connect pH and ORP probes to the system. And we can take that from, the simplest use case would be just telling you when something is not right, to, because we run all of the salt chlorine generators, right? We're able to control your salt system's output, not by having you guess at, what's normally called duty cycle, right? That you need to be running at in a duration of time, but to really drive that system off of the real needs of your body of water for sanitizer. So, most of the time you will typically see saltwater pools being somewhat over-chlorinated because, people obviously err on the side of caution, right? It doesn't really smell nice or feel super nice, but that's what most folks do. And so in our world, right, you can actually have a sensor drive your need for chlorination. It's also very important for smaller bodies of water because obviously real easy to over-chlorinate a hot tub, for example, compared to a pool. You don't need to be off by a lot to have a pretty serious amount of chlorine put into a hot tub, for instance. And then, of course, the next step to that would be if you if you have an ability to run a dosing system that would dispense acid for pH control or CO2 or liquid chlorine, right? We can do that as well. And so you kind of get this really good combination of capabilities in terms of overall package and kind of the peace of mind. And where it really shines is because we are able to comprehensively understand what's going on the pad. We can do things that unfortunately most of our competitors don't do, right? So a good example would be, imagine, you're back to our hot tub example. If you have a classic setup where you have a separate automation system and a separate chemical controller, what will typically happen is that when your chemical controller reads some, well, let's call it a pH level that's too high, right? It's going to then go into its dosing mode, right? It's completely unaware of the fact that, let's say, the spa jets are on, which means that likely you are in that spa, right? And so what it's going to do is it will begin dosing acid at you while you're in the spa, right? Giving you a bit of an acid bath, okay? And I would claim that most folks are not really enjoying that too much, right? And unfortunately, because of the fact that most of our competitors are essentially unaware of what's going on, they can't easily determine that now is not a perfect time to dose acid, for example, right? Whereas with the Attendant, what we are able to do is we can say, okay, we understand that there's a need for dropping your pH, but now is not a perfect time. We're going to wait until the system is in some, let's call it idle mode, right, where we're just filtering, and we can do that a little bit later, right? So things like that, I think are going to really help improve the quality of kind of how you are actually dosing chemicals.
Well, another great question that we had was, can you explain how the Attendant's vendor agnostic device control works and what the value proposition is for pool owners?
Well, look, I think that the value proposition is probably the easiest one to tackle. In fact, one of the reasons for why this product exists was the fact that we were somewhat disappointed with my team of founding partners when we started this, that it was essentially impossible for a builder, a servicer, homeowner to pick and choose the components that they want. The whole industry is kind of built on lock-in, right, on this quote unquote bundle, right, that forces everybody to a particular manufacturer's suite of products, right, whether or not they are best of breed in a particular category, right? And so what we really were driving towards is giving you that choice, right? Whether you want, the best or the least expensive. Fundamentally, it has to be a choice that, the pool professional or the homeowner gets to make, right, without having to sacrifice the ability to include automation into the equation. And unfortunately, with the bulk of what you see out there right now, automation only really works in a full-featured, comprehensive manner with a particular manufacturer's portfolio of equipment. So we basically wanted a system where you could pick, your favorite thing, no matter what it was. And so that's kind of what drove us to accumulate a massive lab where we have, probably every single thing that we've seen in this space for the last decade. We've done this with pumps, we've done this with salt systems, we support everybody's lights. We certainly aim to support everybody's heaters, chillers, and so forth. So really, we think that the Attendant is pretty unique in that we've got everybody be a first-class citizen, right? Sometimes we can even introduce new capabilities into things like valves, for example, where we've got some unique patents on being able to control a valve that previously was simply controlled by its limit switches, right? We can position those valves to be in a in any desired position. Right, but at a minimum, we want to make sure that you've got 100% of the capability of whatever piece of equipment that you purchased, right? So if it's a Pentair pump that has flow-based power level settings, right, we will support that, right? If you have a system that can report error codes or do something nice from a diagnostics perspective that helps the servicers, we will support that as well.
Here's some of the information that was on your website. It can tell you and notify you when filters are dirty, pipes are obstructed, pumps are not working, water levels are low, valves aren't functioning, salt cells aren't working. I mean, this is all valuable stuff to pool contractors too, right? So do they get these notifications as well?
Yes, they do. So what we've really kind of looked at the two primary use cases here. One is, of course, the homeowner, and we want them to understand what's going on in in terms that are accessible to somebody who is just a user, right? Who really wants to enjoy their hot tub without worrying about all the pieces of equipment that make it happen. Right, and then the second use case is, of course, how do we make it good for the professionals to be able to manage a whole large fleet, a big customer base, right? And so we basically create a single pane of glass right in the same app, right? Depending on who you are, we show you somewhat different options. But if you're a professional, we will show you the entire fleet that you have. So every single pool pad, we will show you all of the things that are going on that deserve attention with each of those pool pads. So it could be as simple as, hey, we're seeing obstructed flow, right, or some filter needs to be cleaned, down to actual kind of do not pass go equipment failures that require a service call. And we basically make it easy for you to see, out of potentially hundreds of sites that you might be maintaining, which ones deserve to be prioritized. You can configure push notifications and do things that make it really easy for kind of central dispatch type situation to be able to direct technicians around. And when you do go, right, the other thing that we really aim to do is to make sure that you are going one time, right? Today, I think the most frequent thing you see out in the field is that there's a minimum 2 visits to every service situation. There's 1 visit to diagnose, right, and then you discover what's going on, and then the second, then typically a trip to a warehouse or supplier for whatever parts are required, right, or some replacement piece of equipment. What we really try to do is to make sure that whenever you show up at a pad, that you're 100% aware of what's going on, and hopefully you show up with all the things you need to do the repair in one trip.
Well, can you walk me through the process a little bit of using the Attendant for remote equipment diagnostics? I know you guys have an app, right?
Yeah. So basically, there's kind of the most simple use case would be you open the app, and there's a clients list for a pool professional, and that client list has every single pool pad. It's prioritized by issues, right? So the ones with more severe problems go first on that list. So we make sure that it's easy for you to know what you want to be focusing on, especially if you have a big list of clients. And then when you click into a particular client, we will show you a digest, a summary of kind of all the things that we've observed on that pad that warrant attention. That might in and of itself be enough for you to get going. Again, this is really powerful when you couple it with our ability to get detailed error codes from all the different appliances, to where we will tell you that some site with a Hayward pump has a DC voltage high alert, right? And typically, if there's a service manual provided by the manufacturer, we will also have an excerpt from the service manual right on screen for the servicer to see what the steps are supposed to be to address whatever condition they have. right? And so now you're able to see that, hey, you know what, this is not a fixable problem, right? I just need to go get a new pump for this particular client, right? And that could be the beginning of your conversation with that customer, right? Or, you know, it starts you going to SCP to pick up that replacement pump.
Can your product work in any type of pool system, or are there limitations? Does it work with residential pools, commercial pools?
So we clearly got our start in residential pools. Now, with that said, we've obviously, and one of the reasons for why we pursued the NSF 50 certification is to really have a compelling offering for commercial pools as well. You know, so in the spirit of supporting all the equipment out there, we're constantly adding support for, you know, large variable frequency drives and things that you would typically see in commercial pools to really be able to drive all of that equipment. Obviously, you know, the requirements for chemical management are a bit more stringent, and that's one of the reasons, again, for why we went through NSF 50 to make sure that we were able to do all the controls and dosing of chemicals as would be required in a commercial pad. But fundamentally, we don't really draw a line between residential and commercial. So, you know, it is our belief that you deserve safe, clean water to swim in a residential setting just as much as you do in a commercial setting. And we really want to deliver the same quality and the same experience for a homeowner as we would for a commercial pad. So, you know, that's hence why we don't, for instance, have a commercial part number, right? As you would typically see with most of our competitors, they have a separate system for commercial applications. We really don't. We believe that the Attendant will serve the needs of both residential and commercial customers equally as well.
I just wanted to hit on some of these talking points of what's been listed as features on your website. Control of up to 50 variable speed pumps, expandable support up to 8 relay devices, support up to 5 temperature sensors, support up to 5 flow switches, support up to 5 actuators, and support up to 5 low voltage relays. Is universal pH and ORP probe connectivity for water quality management. I mean, it sounds like a really robust system that you built there.
Well, we certainly wanted to have, you know, a single controller that could do everything, whether it was a simple pool, right, with, you know, perhaps nothing more than a pump, a heater, and a light, to a very elaborate pool. And, you know, we've certainly had the pleasure of some really interesting installations that have, you know, dozens of pumps and tens of fire features, really interesting lighting and so forth. And we've obviously been trying to create one unit that's optimally sized for, you know, let's call it the 90th percentile pool. We also, one of the things that you can do with our system is you can stack multiple units. So, you know, if you do have a situation where you have, let's say, 20 fire features that you want to control independently, you can put in multiple attendants together, and then they become kind of a master slave type setup where you just chain them together, and then you basically get double, triple, however many more you know, relays, ports, valves you need. So, you know, we're not necessarily limiting you to what a single attendant panel can do, but we do believe that, you know, the vast majority of our customers can control everything that they have on their pad with a single attendant.
So one of the other questions that we had was about the Airbnb mode and what that does and why it's a useful feature for pool owners who want to rent out their homes.
Sure, we can talk about that. In fact, I would say that that's not even strictly limited to Airbnb type situations, although that illustrates the capability well. But certainly if you have a teenager, it might come in incredibly handy as well. So obviously, you know, as you see all these properties that are on Airbnb and VRBO, you always have this push and pull, right? On one hand, if somebody is staying at your property and they're, you know, you want them to have a good time, right? You want them to enjoy your home. You want them to leave you a good review. right? Hopefully come rent with you again. At the same time, of course, if you give your renter completely unchecked, unfettered ability to control your pool pad, you could be in for a fairly expensive, unpleasant surprise, right? I mean, who doesn't like a 70,000 gallon hot tub, right? You know, there's absolutely nothing that stops your renter from cranking up your heater on your pool to 102 degrees, right? And leaving it like that for 3 or 4 days. And so what we wanted to do was to create this kind of nice cogent experience where, as a property owner, property manager, I could give my renter an ability to control all the things that I want them to control. So, you know, perhaps I want them to enjoy the lighting, and I want them to be able to, you know, run the hot tub or, you know, heat the pool to a particular temperature, right? But I don't want it to be a complete free-for-all, right? I want to be able to set limits on temperatures. I want to be able to set limits on which pieces of equipment they can control. You know, do I want them to see the button for the pool cleaner? You know, probably not, right? I want all of that to run on its schedule. I don't want them messing with it. Something as simple as just time boxing your renter, right? So typically what happens now is, if you do give your renters an ability to access your pool, it's going to be, you're just giving them a username and a password, right? And then they leave with it, and then they can control it forever. So, you know, with the Attendant, you're basically able to say, okay, here's, you know, Mr. Renter. You add them through the app as one of the folks who get to access your pool. You put in an email address for them, and then you define the parameters, right? Everything from when the control starts and the control ends to the types of devices and what they can actually do. And once you've done that, that person gets an email with an invitation link. They can download the Attendant app, and then they have control over your pool pad within the parameters that you've defined. And as I said, that's great for renters. It's pretty great for teenagers that, you know, you might want them playing with lights, but not necessarily changing much else, and certainly probably not messing with chemistry and sanitizer configurations and things like that. And at the same time, everybody gets full visibility as to kind of which button was pressed. That's another thing that we do, which is pretty unique. We keep a full log of essentially every interaction with the system, so you can have that visibility. You can see, you know, who did what.
One question that we had to do with installation. Like, how easy is it to install the Attendant?
Well, we've certainly tried to make it as straightforward as possible. Obviously, the fact that we support essentially everything makes the unhappy scenario of you try to install the automation system and, you know, some piece of equipment that you have on the pad is not compatible. You know, we think that we have done a pretty comprehensive job of supporting kind of this very large catalog of things. So that is pretty straightforward. I think our configuration is also pretty intuitive. So, you know, we're not asking you to learn, you know, these programming paradigms that you would with a lot of the competitors, right? We're not asking you to set up interlocks. We're not asking you to think through kind of all the bad things that you want to prevent the equipment on the pad from doing. With the Attendant, the way that you set it up is you simply tell us how your site is plumbed, kind of what all the different paths of the water are through the various pieces of equipment, and then you let us figure out the most optimal routing of water. You let us figure out the positioning of the valves, and so on and so forth. So, you know, we think that it's actually really straightforward to configure this. And then we have several different things that we do for retrofit type situations. If you're replacing a legacy automation system, you know, we can actually support scenarios where most of your high voltage power connections stay in the existing load center or are still connected to the load center part of your legacy automation system that you're replacing. And then you're just basically moving low voltage wires around for things like, you know, wires for variable speed pump controls and, you know, perhaps temperature sensors, things like that. You know, our goal is certainly to make sure that the installation is done as quickly as possible. And, you know, we've definitely had pool professionals be in and out in less than 2 hours, kind of soup to nuts with putting in an Attendant to replace an existing automation system.
Are there any ongoing costs or maintenance required for the Attendant system?
No, we don't. We don't. If you're asking for charge subscription, we do not. Right. Obviously, we don't automatically refill your chlorine tank with chlorine, right? And so those costs will be still the responsibility of the homeowner. But the attendant itself is essentially a one-time purchase. Once you make it, we deliver a software update with enhancements, typically once a month, sometimes more frequently than that, right? So even units that we've sold, a year or two out or a year or two ago will be brought up to kind of the latest level of capability. A good example would be the water leveling stuff that we added a little over 3 months ago. Right, that was a feature that rolled out to the whole fleet, and so now all of our customers can replace the levelers or whatever other water leveling system that they have, and just have the attendant control and things like that.
What kind of support and troubleshooting options do you offer for your users? And do you offer any kind of training or support to pool technicians or installers who are going to be working with the attendant?
So I think that's super important. We obviously prefer to have folks go through about a 45-minute to an hour training session with us before their first installation. We also have trainers that travel around the country and make it their business to join some of our dealers on their installations, to train, to assist in any way. Obviously, from a product perspective, we really try to make sure that everything is intuitive enough to where simply looking at the app without any background or training, you're able to be successful. That's kind of a continuous effort for us. We constantly try to improve the user experience. We constantly try to make it more transparent as to kind of how everything works. But we also do believe in dedicated trainings, and so right on our website we have an ability to have interested folks sign up for a training class, and we'll do it remotely. One of the nice things about us being kind of a cloud first system is that we have full control over and full ability to see what's going on with every single pad that's connected to the internet. So when a pool professional does have a question, or if they have an issue that they're troubleshooting, our support technicians are actually able to remotely access all of those units. They have very low level access to the bits and the bytes that really impact kind of anything from how we're speaking to some heater on the pad to the current Wi-Fi signal strength, right? And so they're going to be able to effectively help our dealers in need very, very quickly, as opposed to trying to talk through an issue, right? We almost always see exactly what's going on right away without relying on the pro at the pad to tell us.
Right, because you got optics over what's going on with the pool equipment because it's connected, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or conversely, if it's not connected, if we're unable to communicate with a particular piece of equipment, we can very quickly surface that to the pool pro.
Right. Well, I saw that you're going to be interfacing with PAL lighting. That's pretty cool. Are there any other additional features or functionalities that you plan to roll out to the attendant in the future?
So yes, we have a massive list of improvements that we are looking to add. I think that this is not a product where we built it and we're done, right? What the attendant really is a platform for us to continually deliver better and better software to all these pool pads. And so as we evolve, as we build new things, we're obviously aiming to deliver that to every single pool pad that has the attendant, no matter when that unit was purchased. So that's certainly something we're aiming to do. PAL is a great partner of ours. One of the things that you've probably picked up on is the fact that we're all about breaking bundles and creating open ecosystems. And so one of the things that this industry has, I think, really been behind on, and by a lot, is light, right? If you look at, just go on Amazon, look at a light strip that your kids can buy for $15, right? That light strip has an order of magnitude more capability than a pool light that you're going to buy from most of the legacy vendors today for many hundreds of dollars. And we thought that that's really a shame, right? Because you're spending all this money on kind of your backyard oasis, and unfortunately, the things that you actually see, like lighting, are really, really limited in what they can do. And so we basically worked with Pal. We're the first to start to deliver DMX-based lights to the space. And so now, obviously, DMX is not new. It's been in the kind of a concert venue space for decades now, right? But it is an open standard, and obviously, you've got PAL, but you've got lots of other competitors who do already make DMX compatible lights. And they have all the capabilities that you need to deliver modern experiences, right? If you want to synchronize your lights to music, for example, right, and listen to your favorite song with some custom color show, right, thumping to the beat of the music. If you have, light strips and you want to see cool effects like lights running around your pool, right? All of that is now possible. Right. And just like we did that with lights, I think I told you about the things we did with valve actuators, right? We're slowly winding our way to try to innovate on all the different aspects of the pool pad.
Well, I know a few different professionals that are using it as part of their equipment set. It's a really forward-thinking and empowering product for both pool owners and professionals. I mean, we'll be highlighting it in our Pool Technology segment in the summer issue of Pool Magazine. Thanks so much, Stan, for taking the time to chat with us a bit and answer some questions we had about the Attendant.
Sure. Sounds good, Joe.
This podcast is sponsored by Tieleman Pool Technology. Experts have predicted that Tieleman movable floors are going to take the pool industry by storm. So are you a high-end pool builder who wants to expand their business and increase sales with this luxurious pool solution? Then don't miss this opportunity, as Tieleman Pool Technology is looking for dealers in the United States. Learn more about us by visiting our website at tieleman.eu.